Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Garda Goes Geek. On today's episode, I'm going to be discussing a series that I was really looking forward to. Just a short review over it. Well, I say short, it'll probably be a bit longer than some of my other reviews, reviewing a whole series of TV, especially when the series is as good as this. And that is Gen V, the spin-off from Amazon Prime's The Boys. So, as I said in my Boys episode, Gen V is based on the arc from the comic book of The Boys called We Gotta Go Now. The We Gotta Go Now arc is basically the Boys' take on the X-Men, and being a huge X-Men fan and, being a big fan of Huey in the comic book especially, and him being the central character of this particular arc, I really enjoyed it. I think it's probably my favorite overall arc from the comic. And it's an interesting look at some soups who actually are victims. Characters like the Seven are, the Seven and Payback, and a lot of the other soups that we meet across the Boys are just horrible people. Teenage Kicks as well. They're very nasty. But I forgot what they're called. I think they're like the G-Men, because they're all Godolkin characters. Like Godolkin is basically the Professor X analog who's teaching them. Godolkin is this horrible character, and the students that he has are basically his victims, his playthings. And yes, as literally as you would think, it gets quite extreme. And so he very rarely takes in anyone that he hasn't already known for a long portion of their life. Like, Godolkin basically has a lot of free reign because Vought can't stop him, because the G-Men make a lot of money, which is obviously an echo to, the fact that the X-Men make Marvel a lot of money, or at least they did back at the time. So it was like, there's very little that Vought can actually do to control Godolkin. And in the comics, like, it's even implied that Godolkin, less implied, I think it's outright stated, that Godolkin is actually making his own soups. Like, he's deliberately going out there making his own soups so that they can be inducted into the G-Men. He's turning the G-Men into this huge franchise. In the same way that the X-Men franchise, you have the X-Men, but you also have all these spin-off super teams. You have the same with the G-Men in The Boys. They are, this huge spin-off group of characters. Now, like I said, We Gotta Go Now is a very good arc of the comics. It's one of my favorite arcs in the comics, and I like what it's doing. This is very, very different, as has been the case for a lot of The Boys. The Boys is incredibly different from the comic, as my previous episode showed, hopefully. And this is no different. In fact, I don't think there's even any characters here that are from the comic. Like, these all seem to be original characters. Godolkin himself doesn't appear. The style of Godolkin is different. Like, it's not, a shut-up mansion in North New York in the same way that the X-Men mansion is. Like, no, this is an actual open university campus in upstate New York. It's very interesting. And it is in canon with The Boys TV show. Like, this is designed as a spin-off. I don't think you necessarily need to have seen The Boys to enjoy it. So if The Boys isn't your thing, you might enjoy this. You might not, though, because it has a lot of the same content as The Boys. So it depends what your issue is with The Boys. You know, if your issue is the gore, the graphic violence, the sexual humor, the swearing, a lot of that's all still here. But what you do have at the core of this is an interesting mystery story and a focus on some very interesting characters. So, like I said, Gen V is set around Godolkin University this time. And this university is attended by pretty much every teenage superhero. So, in fact, you know, I think it's even confirmed during the run of the show that A Train and The Deep are both graduates of Godolkin, and they're not the only ones. So I think it's implied that most soups have gone through Godolkin. Not all of them, but a lot of them. You know, because obviously there was some that were locked up in Red River and things like that in the previous seasons. There's very little crossover between characters from the actual main boys show. Some of them do appear. Madeline Stillwell gets a video flashback. Grace Mallory gets a scene towards the end. Victoria Newman gets an appearance in one of the later episodes. There's a couple of cameos in the final episode that I'm not going to reveal because they're very clearly setting things up to show how this is going to tie in to the boys. But it also seems to be keeping it separate from the boys at the same time. Like, you could just watch this and then watch season 2 of Gen V, and I don't think you would need to have seen the boys. Like, it tells you who, you know, it catches you up on the things like, for example, that Homelander killed someone at the end of season 3. Like, that's mentioned. And obviously they kind of discuss who Homelander is, so that all makes sense. But, you know, A-Train, Ashley, The Deep, Soldier Boy even, through some quite interesting usage, you know, all have little cameos throughout this, but most of them don't really get focused on. There are a couple of minor characters who have more prominent roles, like Burke, who was the film producer, the one who directed Dawn of the Seven, and is one of Ashley's kind of yes men at Vought. He has a couple of guest appearances in this, as does Cameron Coleman, the news anchor of the Vought News Network. He's got a fairly prominent role in a couple of episodes. There is one character in this who is an adaptation of a character from the comic, though. That is the character of Derek Wilson, who... the character played by Derek Wilson, I should say. He's the character of Tek Knight. Now, Tek Knight in the comics is essentially a kind of a Batman / Iron Man type allegory. He appears in the story Get Some, which is the follow-up arc to Name of the Game, which is the first arc of the comics. So he's one of the characters who appears quite early. And there's a lot of interesting twists and turns in the Tek Knight story. It's quite a tragic one. Billy Butcher has no compassion for him because he's essentially someone he's not a soup, but he's pretending to be one. You know, he's done the Batman thing or the Iron Man thing of making himself an armored suit and gadgets so that he can join superheroes. And I think Tek Knight is a former member of Payback in the comics. In this, though, he is a soup. And he only appears in one episode. I think it's the fourth one, I want to say. It's a pretty good episode. There's 8 episodes in this altogether. And he appears in the 4th episode. And if you have read the comics and you're aware of who Tek Knight is and what Tek Knight's story involves, there are some things that they keep from the comic story, but I don't want to spoil it if for anyone who doesn't know. But yeah, some of that was quite funny. Yeah. But he's the only real comic character, apart from previous adaptations like The Deep, A Train, Ashley, etc., who actually appears in this in a significant role. The other characters, however, like the main characters of the series, there's basically 7 or 8 main characters. And it really does have a kind of X-Men vibe in that they're a group of young teenage superheroes. Now, they are more sympathetic than the superheroes that we've seen in The Boys, in that they're younger. Some of them genuinely do want to help people. Some of them just want to be famous. But a lot of them, some of them have good intentions. Some of them have evil intentions. But a lot of them are just want to be kids. They're kind of in over their heads. They're superpowered humans, but they just want to be kids. We see them, doing all the sort of university comedy stuff of like, raucous parties and orgies and sneaking off campus and going out drinking and doing drugs. And, it's all stuff that fits, I suppose. It makes sense. And the actors themselves, there seems to be a trend, especially in American shows, I've noticed, of college students and high schoolers being played by obviously much older actors, but also these model good-looking people. And, a lot of this cast is very good looking. They're very aesthetically pleasing, don't get me wrong. Both the men and the women. But they also do look young enough. They look like young adults, late teenagers, young adults. They look college age, is what I should say. Even though obviously some of them are not. Jazz Sinclair, who plays the main character of Bloody Marie, I don't think she is 18, for example. I get the feeling the actress is probably a lot older, probably in her mid-20s. But she looks young enough that she could pass for a young woman, someone in, a few years younger. So I think it's one of those, because I used to work in bars. I think if you've ever worked in a bar, if you have someone that you would ID come to your bar, that's what they should look like if they're playing college age. Someone who looks college age. I don't care how old they actually are, but they need to look like they would get ID'd in a bar. For me, that's my perspective on it. It's like, okay, you're coming into the bar. I don't believe that you're over the limit to drink alcohol. Show me some ID. And there's so many actors I've seen in so many things that do not pass that test. But yeah, I've already kind of spoken about Marie, so let's do the main characters. Marie is definitely the main one. She gets the nickname Bloody Marie in a lot of the promotional material, but I don't think she's ever called it in the show. The reason she has that nickname is because she is a hemokinetic. She's able to psychically manipulate blood. Now, usually that involves her cutting herself so that she can actually access her blood and bring it out. But it does show that she's got a lot more power. There's little hints at the things that she can actually do, and the full potential of her power. And it's quite a terrifying power. It gives her quite a lot of control and awareness of not just her own body, but other people's bodies as well, which I think is really interesting. She's quite a tragic character in this. Her background is that she accidentally kills her parents during her first period because her powers kick in during her period. Now that's very similar to X-Men. A lot of their abilities triggering during adolescence, and I think that's something that is true of the Supes in the comic as well. So yeah, it's quite a traumatic thing, and she was basically in like the foster care system. Her sister wants nothing to do with her. She just wants to find her sister and prove that she can look after her. Because they're estranged. Marie is the older sibling. Her younger sister is kind of gone. And she gets sponsored to go to Godolkin University, and it's one of those, if she didn't go to Godolkin, or if she flunks out of Godolkin, she'll end up in Red River. So there's that kind of hanging over her. There's Andre Anderson. He is the son of a former superhero and one of the board members at the university, called Polarity. So Polarity is basically he's basically got magnetic powers. He's essentially a kind of Magneto style character. I think he's also mentioned as a former member of the Seven. He's a trustee at the university. That's it. I've forgotten the word. Trustee at the university. So obviously was a famous superhero, was someone who's now retired. He is very much pushing for Andre to take on the role of Polarity and become like the big hero. And it's one of those, Godolkin graduates are sort of ranked, Godolkin students, I should say, are ranked. And it's like the attention they get, the social media presence, things like that, increases their ranking, which is, that's how we've seen this universe work. If people are talking about you, you've got more chance of being more successful, because people are going to want to see you. They're going to want to buy your merchandise and things like that. And that's what gets them into the Seven. And obviously, A-Train went into the Seven. And, anyone who's seen The Boys knows that the Seven's down quite a few members right now. So, a couple of students graduating and heading that way would be pretty good. Andre's best friend is Luke Riordan. He has the name Golden Boy. Like, that's his soup name. He's basically being looked at as like the favorite for the Seven. And he's played by Patrick Schwarzenegger, who I've never seen in anything. But I didn't even realize that he was a Schwarzenegger until I sort of looked at the cast list, and I was like, oh, really? It doesn't look like his father much, in my opinion. Maybe in a still photograph, but I didn't notice it in the show. He's essentially, he's able to control fire, light himself on fire. He's got superhuman strength. He's being sponsored by Clancy Brown's character of Brink. Brinkoff, I think his name is. Richard Brinkerhoff. He is the professor at Godolkin, and he's the chairman of what's called the Lamplighter School of Crime Fighting, because the Godolkin University campus is kind of split into separate schools. So there's like the Godolkin, the Lamplighter School of Crime Fighting. There's the what was the acting school called? Because there's like an acting one as well, and I think it's like the Crimson Countess School of Acting. So they're named after previous superheroes that we've met, which I think is pretty cool as well. But yeah, Brink is essentially, he's got quite a lot of influence, and he's trying to get Golden Boy onto the Seven. Like, I think it's pretty much guaranteed Golden Boy is going to go into the Seven, at least in the first episode. Things happen in the first episode that completely derail that. And I don't want to spoil it because it's a very good spoiler. I will say the first 3 episodes of this all dropped at once. And I think that really works, because episode 3 ends on a real kind of what the hell cliffhanger to lead into the next ones. So I think you get like a good chunk of story before going on. And I like it when shows kind of stagger their release like that. You don't get... It always seems to be at the start or the end of a series, though. It never seems to be like in the middle. For example, like give us a couple of slow burns and then give us two that are really big and action heavy, like at once, you know. But it is what it is. But yeah, yeah. There's some twists and turns that mean that Golden Boy won't be joining the Seven, and it kind of throws open the field for the other characters. Luke is, like I said, he's Andre's best friend. He's also dating Kate Dunlap. She is a soup with telepathic abilities, and her telepathic abilities work quite well. It's a really interesting idea. She's basically able to what she calls push, which is basically means she wears gloves like Rogue of the X-Men. But what her gloves do is if she has skin contact with her hands, she's able to like influence someone's behavior through mind control. And she's a very interesting character. There's a lot going on with her character and some very interesting backstory bits and a lot of nice revelations. She was one that kind of flew under the radar for me in the first couple of episodes, but really kind of grew to become one of the most important characters in the show for me. Another character who I really like a lot is Brink's assistant, who is Jordan Lee. Jordan Lee has a really interesting power, as far as I'm concerned. They are a gender shifter. So what that means is they have a male form and a female form, both played by completely different actors. And they will actually shift from one form to the other. But not only that, each form has its own superpower. So the female form is able to fire energy blasts, and the male form has superhuman durability. So there's one point quite early on where we see them in a fight, and we see them alternating between the two forms so that they can take a hit, but then also hit back. And it's really cool. Like, it's really well done, the transition between it. It does mean, though, for a lot of the runtime, we have one form or the other. But when they use it in the action scenes and have them alternate between the two in quick succession, it works really well. And I think the actors both do a brilliant job of making it so that it is the same character. And, you know, there's a lot of commentary about the fact that they're a gender shifter and they are defined as bi gender as well. So, you know, I don't recall what pronouns get used for them. I'm using they. But they are defined as a bi-gender character, and you know there is a lot of derogatory you know derision that comes with that. you know, because unfortunately that's the world we live in. I really wish it wasn't, but you know, and you know there's the Vought people talking about like the optics. Oh, they're never going to put her in the Seven. She's never going to be they're never going to be a big superhero. You know, you can't sell that in the south of America, you know, in the southern states like Alabama or Texas. And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately. And then the final character, which I don't want to say too much about, is quite mysterious, and a lot of it gets revealed over the show, and it's very plot intensive. And that's the character of Sam. Sam has superhuman strength and durability, and he also has a tendency to see people as puppets. Like, literally, he sees Muppets. He sees people as Muppets. Leads to some of the most hilarious scenes in the show. A lot of fun. Oh, there's one more I haven't spoken about, and that's Emma. Emma is Marie's roommate. Emma is a superhero with a YouTube channel, and her whole thing, she's able to shrink. So she's called Little Cricket. And she's able to like alter her size by essentially purging. So she's basically throwing up in order to shrink. It's really bizarre. There's a lot of content warnings in this show, as you can probably imagine. And yeah, she's really interesting. I like Emma. She has some scenes quite early on which make me feel really bad for her. Like she wants to be an actress, I think, is her whole thing. Um and she's kind of been inspired by Termite, who was a small soup who had a very notable scene in The Boys season 3. Um but yeah, she's just nice. She's just a really nice character. And yeah, she goes through some stuff, but gets some very cool moments as it goes on. Like, if you've seen the trailers for the show, there's a lot of good stuff that revolves around her. And there's a lot of stuff that you won't have seen in the trailers because it's just too whoa, to put in a trailer for this. Very graphic stuff, should we put it that way? Um, and then there's also the dean of the university. The dean of the university is Indira Shetty. Um, she's also a behavioral therapist, and there's a lot going on with her. And again, it's all plot stuff. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to spoil anything. Um, but she's a very interesting character, and Shelley Conn, who plays her, does a brilliant job. She's also from Bridgerton, and she was in Terra Nova as well, which is where I saw her, as well as Beelzebub in season 2 of Good Omens. She's a lot of fun in this. She's very good in the role. The role is really interesting. Like, it's one that she can really sink her teeth into. There's a lot of good stuff in terms of how it's written, how it's directed, certain actions that the actor's able to take. With the character, that make it a lot of fun. There's so many theories kind of digesting stuff that she does on Tumblr and things like that. So there's lots going on. There's a whole group of other students who kind of appear as supporting characters. There's an invisible kid called Maverick who turns out to be the son of Translucent. There's a soup influencer who has she's called Justine. She has a plot line with Emma in one of the earlier episodes. She's another one who's going to the school, the Crimson Countess School. Crimson Countess School of Performing Arts, that's it. There's obviously the older polarity as well. There's a psychic student called Rufus who's got telepathy, astral projection, clairvoyance. He has a rather interesting moment, shall we say. A very notable moment that they put in the previously on for a couple of episodes, which I saw some very, very visceral reactions to online. And there's just interesting stuff here. And I think it's a lot of fun and a lot of, like I said, a lot of really interesting stuff. I really enjoyed it. And the hook for the second season at the end is great. And, it's going to take a while because of the strikes and everything else, but it'll be really interesting to see it when it does come out. Really, really interesting. And yeah, I could probably discuss spoilers. I know in a lot of videos like this, I do videos and podcasts like this, I do a spoiler discussion. There's a lot of good stuff here that I don't really want to spoil. I want people to watch this because I think it's good. And like I said, this is my favorite arc from the comic. It's parodying and directly inspired by the X-Men, who are some of my favorite comic characters. And it's a spin-off of the Boys series, which adapts the comics brilliantly by not adapting the comics in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I think this was really good. And I had a lot of fun with it. Excuse me, an awful lot of fun with it. So yeah, heartily recommended. Go watch Gen V. If you like the boys, if you don't like the boys, just give it a try. Watch a couple of episodes. If you're still not feeling it, fine. But I think you will. I think there's a lot here to like. It's a very interesting show. So yeah, like I said, I'm not going to do a proper spoiler discussion on this one like I normally do. But I will say that everything that I liked about the Boys series is also here. So the parodies of pop culture, the parodies of celebrity culture. It's more celebrity culture than pop culture in this one. Like the ranking system at Godolkin is a real. It's a recurring plot point through a lot of the early episodes. And there's a lot of very interesting stuff and twists and turns in the story, and about, you know, these kids having to sort of cultivate a media personality at the same time. Now, some of it that does get abandoned because of plot, because there are plot reasons why some things sort of fall to the wayside after a point, but I don't want to spoil why that is, because I think the plot here is really good. And you might guess some of it, but yeah, there's kind of layers and layers in this one. And I think it's of the spin-offs that we've had for the boys so far, which is the animated series Diabolical and this is by far the better one. Diabolical didn't really think much of. And I think this kind of proves that the universe of the boys, at least in how it's been created in the show, is that rich and that well developed, and the parody in it is that good that we can do more spin-offs. And so I don't know whether I would like more spin-offs. I think this one is helped by the fact that it had a basis in the comic books. And obviously it is trying something very different with the idea of the younger heroes. I'm not sure how successful other spin-offs could be, but I do get the feeling with the fact that this was almost instantly renewed for a second season, and that The Boys is now approaching its 4th season, and eventually The Boys will end. Like, if The Boys follows the comic, that storyline is going to end. It would not surprise me if Amazon will be looking at this universe and going, well, how can we develop it out? How can we develop more stuff in this universe? And I think Gen V is a direction of that. Because, unfortunately that's capitalism, and everything has to become a product and nothing can sort of stand on its own. But that's a different discussion, unfortunately. But yeah, I have to admit, what they did here, I was dubious about it, but what they did here really worked. So I think there is potential there, and I think, Amazon at least has to be considering the possibility of, well, could we get more out of this universe? And when they do it, I think it's going to be the kicker, because obviously, like I said, the Boys comic comes to a very definite conclusion, and the Boys show, while it is changing a lot from the comic, is following a lot of those main plot progression beats from season to season. And so the plot line of this is going to come to an end. And so by the time that happens, I'm not sure how successful any spin-offs would be after the main show ends, purely because of what I suspect they would have to do if they continue adapting the comics. Now, they might try something completely different. God knows they've reinvented a lot of things from the comics. There's nothing to say they're going to do the exact same ending. And I definitely don't think their ending is going to be as pessimistic as the one in the comic was. But, you know, I think something like Gen V or any other potential spin-off also has a similar shelf life. And I think it has to at least be established before The Boys comes to a conclusion. But yeah, I'm intrigued for season 2. And I'm not sure how long it would last beyond that, but I'm definitely intrigued for more. In the meantime, my friends, you all look after yourselves. As usual, take the very, very best care of yourself that you possibly can. If I've done this right, this episode should be coming out shortly before Christmas or shortly just after Christmas. So I hope you all have a fantastic holiday season, whatever denomination you are, whatever faith you celebrate, or even if you have, no religious faith and you just want to get presents and eat nice food and drink nice stuff, just go for it. Whatever makes you happy. Until then, you all look after yourselves, take the very best care of yourselves, and I will speak to you soon. Until next time.
Thank you, my friends, for once again joining me on Gardo Goes Geek. Your continued support for this podcast means the absolute world to me, and I am grateful for every single one of you who stays and listens to one of my episodes. It means the absolute world. Now, if you would like to engage more with me or the podcast, we have a Discord community, small but growing, and we now have commissions open on Ko-Fi. So if there's a topic you would like to see me cover, you can pay me to cover it. All funds will be used for legal purchase of the relevant items where I do not have them. Have a look on the link tree for more information. Until next time, look after yourselves.